All right, Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back. Yes,
Oh,
we are live again on Facebook, brothers and sisters. Sorry, we had a little technical glitch there, but now it's showing we are live. Dr. Wajid, how are you? Okay?
Assalamu alaikum. Yeah, alhamdulillah, I'm fine. Thank you.
Good, good, good. Right. Just a few shout outs, inshallah. Please, 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 those of you who are watching, please do share this video. Inshallah, this would allow more people to get involved, more people to view, inshallah, and more people to learn from our history nights. So please, please, please press share now. And also afterwards on this page, on the London and South Facebook page for Islamic Relief London South page, please switch on the notifications so that when we do our next history nights, etc., you'll be notified about those activities. And one final thing, Maghrib is about 10, sorry, 10, 7:59, sorry, 7:49, 7:50. We may slightly go over time. If you are fasting, inshallah, may Allah accept it from everyone who's fasting. Do have some glass of water, some dates by your side so you can break a fast when it comes to time. We might go slightly over by 10 minutes or so, inshallah. But so do try and delay Jama'at with the family till then. Other than that, Dr. Wajid, tonight's topic is the Silk Road. And you know what? I thought, what can I wear to make like signify the Silk Road, right? And then I was like, well, I don't know much about the Silk Road. So I was like, oh, I went to Zanzibar and I bought this, and I don't think the Silk Road includes Zanzibar. I know it's part of the spice route, but I'm
It
not
looks a
sure it's
little bit
part of
more
the spice route.
like something our African brothers and sisters will be wearing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So this is from Zanzibar, Tanzania.
Yeah,
But I thought I'll put it on. But I can see you, mashallah, you're wearing something very special as well, something a bit very fine and delicate design you have there, mashallah.
Jazakallah.
Right, Dr. Wad, I'm going to leave you to it. Do introduce the night. For those of you who missed it, History Night is something that we do on a monthly basis. It's using Islamic history or general history about Muslims, um, and looking at history and the stories of the past to take lessons from those stories, and so that we can use those lessons to navigate our future of how us as Muslims, what can we learn from them? How can we use that lessons for us to find a path for ourselves in this chaotic world? So shall we say, it's really a roundabout of life to go through this situation that we're all in. Everyone's in lockdown. The whole globe's in lockdown. Never heard of anything like it. But it is truly one, times where we can reflect. But sometimes we do need to take a break away from just studying or just reading or just working. And so this is opportunity for you to learn something which is beneficial. At the same time, take a break, enjoy this with your family, put it on your on your TV screens, project off your phones onto your TV screens, watch it with the family. It's something that we can all enjoy, inshallah. Dr. Wajid, I'm out. Over to you, inshallah. Do share your slides.
Jazakallah khairan. I'm just going to share my screen. I'm hoping you can see it.
Yep, we can hear it. We can see it.
Perfect. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Jazakallah khairan for giving me a chance, inviting me into your homes to talk about pearls along the Silk Road, stories from the Islamic history of Khorasan. There is often a chance for us to talk about history and to learn about history. And when we do that, the usual suspects are the Ottomans, the Mughals, and the time of the Sahaba. But we don't often look at the history of the outer edges of the Islamic civilization. Places like the African continent, places like Central Asia, places like Europe. And missing out those parts of our history means that our history is incomplete. It's like learning about the history of the 20th century and not really learning about World War II. It is a history, but you missed out a really important chunk of it. And that has an impact on everything else. So the aim today is to take you on a little journey through the Islamic history of Khorasan. What's Khorasan? Khorasan is this part of the world that most of us don't look at. So like I said, we're quite familiar with Medina, Mecca, maybe even the Middle East, the history of the Middle East. But parts of, if you go far away, if you go down to sub-Saharan Africa, if you go to Central Asia, those areas, although they contained a huge amount of Islamic history, lots of wealth of knowledge and lessons for us to draw from, we tend to not know so well. So This is the Silk Route over here, all the way traveling from one end of the world to the other, connecting China and the civilization of China and India all the way through to Europe. And the aim is to alight on that just for a bit. So let's talk about Khorasan and Central Asia. Islam, as we all know, started out of Mecca and Medina, and it grew and it spread all across the whole of the peninsula, of the Arabian Peninsula. And within a very short space of time, the Muslim world included what used to be the Roman Empire on one end and the Persian Empire on the other end. And subhanAllah, it's one of the signs of our Prophet ﷺ being truthful. And you should always look for these signs that Islam is the truth. One of the signs is that at the Battle of Khandaq, the Battle of the Trench, when the Muslims were really at one of their lowest points ever, they were surrounded, they had a trench, they were behind the trench, they were starving, and there was an oncoming force, which was the Confederates, Al-Ahzab, who were coming to destroy them. Not only the Quraysh, but now all the allies of the Quraysh were coming to destroy the Muslims. This was a very scary time. And the Muslims were digging this trench as quickly as they could to try and get some safety for the people in Medina. And while they were digging this trench, and you have to imagine, you have to dig, it's not a small trench, you have to dig a trench that's wide enough that no one can jump across, not even with a horse can jump across it. And if you miss out even one section, that's it, the Muslims will be killed. So while they're digging this trench, they come across this huge boulder, and they can't destroy the boulder, they can't break it. They have to break this boulder, otherwise when the Quraysh come, it's all for nothing. So they try and they can't do it, and then they invite the Prophet ﷺ, because you have to escalate to the top. So they escalated right to the top, can't go any higher than that, go straight to the Prophet ﷺ and say, we can't break this stone. So the Prophet ﷺ comes, and then he strikes the stone himself, and there's a flash of lightning, and then he strikes it again, and there's another flash of lightning, and then he strikes it for the third time, and the stone breaks. And the Prophet ﷺ says words to the effect of that he sees the palaces of Qaisar and Kisra, the Caesar of Rome and the Khosrows of Persia, are in the hands of the Muslims. You have to ask yourself, at that time when no one would give the Muslims a chance in hell of surviving, when they're starving and when they look like they're at the edge of defeat, to predict that they would take over the Roman and Persian Empire at the same time is nothing short of a prophecy that confirms that he is Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam truthful, which we know for a fact, but it's nice to have these evidences to believe in from history. So the Muslims did take over Roman Persia, but they didn't stop there. The Persian Empire extended far beyond what is Iran right now. It extended into places like Turkmenistan and Uzbekistan and so on, in what we were called Khorasan. And these were some of the most beautiful cities that were ever there. And as the Muslims expanded and expanded and expanded on this side, they were going to come into contact with another superpower. And this was the Chinese Empire. And the stage was set for one of the biggest battles, one of the most important battles in human history that you've never heard about. The Battle of Talas. And at the Battle of Talas, the Muslim world came into direct conflict with China. And the Chinese Empire and the Abbasid Empire went toe to toe for domination of Asia. And at the end of the battle, the Muslims had won and the Chinese Empire had retreated behind their wall. For the rest of, up to this day, Central Asia and the rest of Asia, apart from China itself, is Muslim territory. And when the Muslims had taken over, after the Battle of Talas, when the Muslims had taken over this land was rich, this land was beautiful, it was fertile, and the people were very intelligent and very resourceful. And it started a new golden age. this is a land where they didn't just build beautiful buildings. I mean, these are what you're looking at right now, which would, rival the Taj Mahal and many of the beautiful buildings in any country in the world, are actually just some of the tombs in Samarkand. They didn't just build these beautiful buildings. They built libraries. They built masjids. They built open-air baths. They built hotels. They built dormitories. They built orphanages. What they built is just astounding. In fact, you can go and see much of it still today. And when you look at these pictures, it just gives you a small taste of what the Muslim world was like in beautiful towns like Merv, like Nishapur, like Samarkand, like Bukhara, like Khiva. If you want to get an idea, just spend a few minutes here in the Rajasthan. This is the Rajasthan of Samarkand. And in the Rajasthan, you have the Friday Mosque and two madrasas facing each other in this big public square. And honestly, when I went there, we were looking around, and it was a crowd of tourists from around the world were just sitting and watching. And I didn't understand what they were waiting for until I saw this. They were waiting to see this sunset in the Rajasthan. And honestly, it is one of the sights that you have to see. If there's something that you need to see in life, you need to see this. The sun setting over here, it is like a pearl. It's like a pearl glowing in the sunset. And these are humongous buildings full of learning and knowledge. The building on the left, the madrasa on the left, nothing over there is just design. The constellation, the pattern of the stars over there are in direct proportion to the constellation of the stars, because it was made at the time of the Sultan Ulugh Beg. Sultan Ulugh Beg of this empire was an astronomer, and in fact, one of the biggest craters on the moon is named after him. And the one on the right is the Madrasa Sherdor, and the one behind is the Friday Mosque. Amazing, beautiful sites that they built. But it wasn't just buildings. It was beyond that. It was the intelligence that they had, the wisdom. They would, people like Ibn Sina, that we all know about, the famous medic who wrote Qanun al-Tib. People like Al-Biruni, the master of scientists. People like people like Imam Muslim, people like At-Tirmidhi, and so on, were all from this area. They didn't just, these guys were so amazing that in a town in the Khorasan area, which is now in Uzbekistan, in a town called Khiva, a man stood on the roof of his house, not of a skyscraper, of his house, was able to look at the sky and calculate the circumference of the world. I have no idea how he did that. I wouldn't be able to calculate the circumference of my own house if I stood on the top of it or anywhere inside it. Even if someone gave me a ruler, I don't know if I'll be able to get there. But somehow this man was able to stand there, look at the sky, and calculate the circumference of the whole earth. And his calculation, when checked, when man went into space and calculated it through the human eye, his calculation was off by 6 kilometers. That's it. How do these people do it? They map the stars. As I've said many times, 2/3 of the stars in the sky are named after Muslims. Why? Because whoever sees something, whoever discovers something gets to name it. So just like, for example, if you have a website in the UK, it's .co.uk. If you have a website in Italy, it's .co.it. Or in India, it's .co.in. But in America, it's not .co.us. It's just .com, because they made websites, so they get to name them. Similarly with stamps, every country in the world has to put their name on the stamp, except in the UK. because they made it so they don't need to put their name on it. So similarly, we discovered the stars, so we got to name them. 2/3 of all the stars in the world are named after Muslims. But it wasn't just the stars in the sky that they were naming. These people had stars on earth as well. And there was no star brighter than Imam al-Bukhari. Imam al-Bukhari was from this area. He was born here and he died here. And this is the structure over his tomb just outside Bukhara in a place called Khartang. And if you go there, it's a beautiful structure, it's a beautiful mosque there, and everything's built. You know, you get an idea of this land, rich in resources, rich in potential, rich in architecture, rich in science and humanity. This was the high point of Muslim civilization in many ways. And yet, as you can always tell, there's a but coming. This is the last emir of Bukhara. And it's not fair on him that I'm using his picture to describe what happens next, because it wasn't him that did it, but it was someone like him. And you know, this shows you the rich clothes that they wore. The emir of Khwarizm at that time, he was a ruthless man. He was evil. And the Muslims were drunk on power because no one could stand in front of, who could stand in front of the Muslims? China, we defeated you. We defeated the Romans. We defeated the Persians. Who is there? You know, the only thing that was limiting us from conquering the entire globe was our knowledge of geography. Uqba ibn Nafi, the conqueror of the northern half of Africa, he went all the way to the edge of Morocco, came to the Atlantic Ocean, and he rode his horse into it, and he said, Ya Allah, I want to bear witness in front of you that I stopped conquest because of the sea. And had there been a land beyond this, I would have conquered it too, because he didn't know that the Americas existed. So we were drunk on our power and our knowledge. And when you become drunk on that, you start becoming corrupt. And the governor of Khwarizm was corrupt. One day, a group of 200 businessmen came from Mongolia. They came to do business, like businessmen do, merchants. So they came to Khwarizm, which is next door, to do some business. And they were robbed of their wealth and they were mistreated. Some say they were killed, others say that they weren't killed, but they were beaten black and blue, and all their goods were taken from them and sent back on their way. So the ruler of the Mongol tribes, Temujin, he sent a letter, he sent an emissary to the governor of Khwarizm and told him, please, can you rectify this mistake? That my people have been, my businessmen have had their goods stolen, they've been mistreated in your land. So can you do something about it, please? Do you know what the governor of Khwarizm did? He had the messenger killed. He had the messenger killed. And he sent the head back to Temujin. How dare you? Who do you think you are, you silly ruler of a small Mongolian tribe? You're going to tell me, the governor of Khwarizm, the Muslim governor, what to do? Get lost. I'm going to kill your messenger, which was, is seen as a really evil thing. They always say, don't kill the messenger. It's not their fault. They're literally just delivering the message. But that's what he did. Unfortunately for him, and unfortunately for all of us, Temujin's other name was Genghis Khan. And when he saw the head of his messenger come back to him, this small-time leader of Mongolian herdsmen and shepherds got up and decided to teach the world a lesson. And when he got up, he didn't sit down until he conquered everything that lay between him and the Atlantic Ocean. The Mongol invasion came and it was merciless. It was so merciless that it took away not only the governor of Khwarizm, not only his governorate, not only the Muslims of Central Asia, but entire empire disappeared. The Samanid Empire disappeared. The Bukhari, the sultanates disappeared. The Abbasid Khalifa disappeared. Everything was destroyed by this Mongol wave. And they decided that they would not leave people alive. They started killing and murdering and pillaging. They built skulls, pyramids of skulls. One pyramid for the skulls of the men, one pyramid for the skulls of the women, one for the children. They would leave no one and nothing in their wake. When they arrived in Bukhara, having devastated everything before them, the Muslims in Bukhara hid themselves in this mosque, the Friday mosque. And the Emir of Bukhara came to them and he said, "Don't worry, everyone, we're saved." And they said, How are we saved? Is there an army coming to relieve us? They said, no. He said, "No, I've ordered that we have Khatm Bukhari in the madrasa. I've ordered that we do Khatm of Bukhari. We read the whole of Sahih Bukhari in the madrasa, and it has been done. Therefore, we're going to be saved." Needless to say, they were not saved. The entire population of Bukhara, which were hiding in the Jum'ah mosque, the doors were open, and the Mongols killed every single man, woman, and child. And Genghis Khan himself, because the people shouted out, "Allah, Allah, Allah, Allah," Genghis Khan stood on the mimbar and he said, I am the scourge of Allah on you. I am the punishment of Allah come on you. Even though he didn't believe in Allah. But he saw that they were unjust. He saw that injustice had prevailed in the land, and he said, I am the scourge of Allah come as a punishment on you. My brothers and sisters, I cannot tell you enough how devastating the Mongol invasion was. One historian said that if it wasn't for the Mongol invasion of Baghdad, mankind would have reached the moon 200 to 400 years before we reached 1969. Because Islamic civilization would have advanced that much. That's how much darkness was brought. Even to this day, most of the Muslim world has not recovered. Baghdad to Nishapur to Merv, none of these cities have recovered. What happened? So what is the lesson from here, my brothers and sisters? The first lesson from this history is that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. It is not enough that you are just. It is not enough that you are not evil. It is not enough that you feel that you are a nice person. That is not enough. I've been thinking so much since this plague has hit us. What is the lesson that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants us to learn? Because He does not do things heedlessly. What is He trying to teach us? And I feel strongly, and I am fearful, that this is the result of the cries of the orphans and the widows of Syria, of the oppressed of Myanmar, of the forgotten in Kashmir, of the imprisoned of Gaza. How many years would their cries go on and we think that we would be safe in our homes? How many times would they hold up their hands to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and beg for justice and we think that it won't come? How long do you think that you can switch the channel and not do something about it, and the punishment of Allah is not going to descend on humanity? Brothers and sisters, I saw a message someone wrote on somewhere on the internet, and it said, "Dear world, how's that lockdown going? Sincerely, Kashmir." I fear very much that what is hitting us is just a small advertisement, a small taster of letting the injustice that is going on day after day, night after night, year after year in the Muslim world continue, and thinking that it is not going to come and bite us. It is going to bite us. It is going to hurt us. It's going to affect our very homes. It will imprison us in our homes. It will affect us. There's an enemy that none of us can see and is taking us away one by one. And no amount of money or living in the first world will save you. First lesson, injustice anywhere. The injustice of that Khwarizm governor did not stay with him. It destroyed everything and everyone for over a century. And the Black Plague, the worst plague, the Black Death that ever affected humanity came with the Mongols. That is how it spread. That is the first lesson. If you are not part of the solution, then you are part of the problem. Save yourself. Save yourself and your family. From now on, work to prevent and counteract the injustices in the world, because they are far too many and there are not many people working against them. This is just a small bonus story that this is the minaret of the Friday Mosque, and it was built, it's called the Kalyon minaret. It was built, it fell down twice beforehand, killing many people. And the guy who built it, because after that the Sultan said that whoever builds it, I want him to build it properly, otherwise I'll kill him. So only one guy stood up, because everyone's like, why would I want to take up a job which if it goes wrong I get killed? So one guy took on the job, and he made the bricks from a special concoction using the blood of bulls and God knows whatever. And then he disappeared. For 2 years they couldn't find him. And when he came back, they said, where were you? We thought you died. What happened to you? And he said, no, I needed those bricks to set for 2 years, but I know that no one would give me 2 years time to let it set. You're all too impatient. So I disappeared for 2 years. Now I've come back because those bricks have set, and now you can build it. So when he built it, he built this most beautiful minaret. And when Genghis Khan had killed everyone, and he looked on this, he looked up and his hat fell off his head. So the people said that, should we destroy it? He said, no, whoever built this did a good job. Leave it. It's the only thing that survived. The second story is a story in a cowshed. Some of you will remember this from the last one. After the Mongols had destroyed everything before them, a funny thing happened, that many of them became Muslim. They fell in love with Islam. They were taught it by the scholars, and they adopted Islam as their religion. Not all of them, but many of them, especially those who had conquered, who were ruling the Muslim lands. And in this land, there was a small-time thief. This thief is, he used to go and try to steal cattle from different places. And one day while he was on a cattle run, he got shot by the owner with an arrow, and it took out his leg. It made him lame. So he was now a one-legged thief. I mean, he had the other leg, but it didn't really work. So a one-legged thief, but on his horseback, he still tried to steal cattle when he could. And one time, him and his family were trying to steal cattle. The farmer caught him, stuck him in a cowshed, probably worse than this one, and locked him and his wife together. And this small-time cattle thief spent 2 years, him and his wife, locked up in a shed with some cows for 2 years. His name was Timur, and he was known as Timur Lung, Timur the Lame, because of his lame leg. But when he came out, he decided that he wasn't going to be a thief any longer. He was going to lead his tribe, and he was going to start doing something a little bit less risky than trying to steal cattle. He tried to conquer land. And subhanAllah, God knows what happened in those 2 years in that cowshed. But when he came out, he started conquering land, so much so that apart from Alexander the Great, no one has personally conquered more land than this guy. And he conquered so much land that he built his own empire, this one-legged Timur Lane. And he built a beautiful empire. with amazing buildings and libraries, much like he started rebuilding much of what was destroyed by the Mongols. And he was a good Muslim. He was actually, some people say, he memorized a lot of the Quran. He kept scholars with him. He had a relative of the Prophet ﷺ, a descendant of the Prophet ﷺ, with him at all times, and he had him buried next to him. So he was a promoter of science and learning. He built mosques. He built a huge mosque called the Bibi Khanum Mosque. He was obsessed with the Mongols, right? Because the Mongols were the great empire before him. And that's where, why a lot of Muslims, they have the surname Khan. It's very odd. It's like a lot of Muslims having the surname Khan is like a lot of Jews having the surname Hitler, right? Because no one in history has tried to kill more Jews than Adolf Hitler. And it would be really odd if a lot of Jews today had the surname Hitler. But that's exactly what happened with the Muslims, because even though probably no one has killed more Muslims than Genghis Khan, there are Khans everywhere you go in the world. Khan is a Muslim name, surname, right? Very popular Muslim surname. And the reason why that name was rehabilitated was because Timur, who was conquering so much land, he was very impressed with the Mongols. He always wanted to show that he was linked to them in some way. He wasn't descended from them. So he married a Mongol princess. She converted to Islam, and a Mongol princess was given the name Khanum, female Khan. So he was very proud of that. He was married into the Mongol family, and Khan was very a very proud thing to have. So a lot of Muslim kings and rulers, like the Mongol emperors and even the Ottomans, would call themselves Khan, the Khan of the Crimea and stuff like that. It became like the title Caesar or Kaiser or Tsar. These are all titles, right? Caesar is the name of this, Julius Caesar, who, if you're born, every human being is born in two ways. They're born normally, or they're born by Caesarian, literally named after Caesar. A month in the year, July, is named after Julius Caesar. The Tsar of Russia, Tsar comes from Caesar. The Kaiser, the Caesar of Rome, it literally is the name of an emperor. So similarly, that was the same with Khan. And he built lots of mosques. One of the mosques he built, one of the biggest mosques in the world at the time, was the Bibi Khanum, named after his wife, the Bibi Khanum Mosque. And this beautiful edifice that you see before you is not the mosque. This is the door. This is one door to the mosque, if it gives you an idea of how big the mosque is. And I tried to find a beautiful picture of the mosque, but you'll find it anyways later on. So he was doing all this building work, and he captured the Quran of Usman radiallahu anhu and brought it back, and it was placed on this tablet in Bibi Khanum Mosque. But he had a dark side. In fact, that was probably most of him, was the dark side. Timur was a bloodthirsty killer. If you want to get an idea of how bloodthirsty this guy was, he ordered his soldiers that each of his soldiers would have to come back to him with the head of 2 enemy soldiers. Otherwise, he would cut off the head of his own soldier. That was the kind of operation he ran. He was merciless. He would kill anything and everyone. He started attacking cities, and he would make towers of heads. Even though he was a Muslim, he would attack Muslim cities and kill the Muslim people. He didn't care. In fact, one city, it was well known that he took the entire population and he didn't even kill them. He built them into a wall and just poured cement on them while they were alive, so that they died in the wall, men, women, and children. I mean, he was maniacal. If I give you one idea of how megalomaniac this guy was, how much of a murderer he was, this one human being is, by conservative estimates, responsible for killing 5% of the world's population in his lifetime. 1 in every 20 human beings who were alive at the time of Timur was killed by Timur. And what is the lesson that I want to bring to you today with the life of Timur? Actually, this is an interesting story. The story goes, this is the famous naan bread of Uzbekistan. This is the famous bread of that area. It's really tasty. It's nice. And he ordered his cook to his baker to make it while they were on campaign. And when he tasted it, he said it doesn't taste right. So he dragged his baker, and everyone thought that, if it's Timur, his solution to everything is to kill, right? So everyone thought that, okay, he's going to kill the baker. And he said, I'm going to kill you because you made the bread not taste right. And I've given you everything. I gave you every single ingredient you could possibly want, and you still didn't make it right. And the baker said, no, you didn't give me every ingredient. At which point everyone was like, oh my God, he really is going to kill this baker. How could he talk back to Timur? And Timur said, what ingredient in the world is there that I didn't give you? And his baker said, you didn't give me the air of Samarkand. The beautiful air of Samarkand is the key magic ingredient for our naan bread. And Timur smiled and said, you're right. The air of Samarkand is the missing ingredient. And that was one of the few times ever that Timur let someone go with his life. Anyway, why is this guy important? This guy's important because Timur was busy, while he was busy killing Muslims, he was starting to turn his head towards China because he was running out of places to conquer. And he was thinking, China looks like a big place that I could conquer. And he would have done it. And at the same time as Timur was conquering China, the Ottoman Sultan, Bayezid Yildirim, Bayezid the Thunderbolt, the great grandfather of Muhammad Fatih, was conquering Europe. And he was the exact opposite of Timur. Where Timur would only fight Muslims, Bayezid would only fight non-Muslims. Where Timur was merciless, Bayezid was merciful. And the Byzantine emperor was getting worried that Bayezid, if left alone, Bayezid will conquer the whole of Europe. And I can't have that. So he made Bayezid and Timur fight each other at the Battle of Angora, modern day Ankara in Turkey. So Timur came to Ankara. Bayezid had to stop fighting in Europe, turn around, and these two armies, the biggest conquering armies, had their own rumble in jungle, their own thriller in Manila. This was the heavyweight showdown of the world. Bayezid the Thunderbolt against Timur the Lame. East versus West, Muslim civil war, and they went at it. And at the end of the battle, Bayezid was captured, the Ottomans were vanquished, and Timur had won. And this is a picture of Timur visiting Bayezid, who some say that he kept in jail, but others say that he actually kept him in a cage like an animal until Bayezid bashed his brains against the rails and died. So what's the lesson, my brothers and sisters? The lesson that I think we can take away from this is your public persona is more important than your personal piety. Far too often for Muslims, we judge someone as Islamic based on their own personal faith, whether they pray, whether they have a beard, whether they say nice words, all these kind of things. When your public actions are probably a more important feature than this. Your personal piety is between you and Allah. Whether you pray is between you and Allah. Whether you fast and your intentions are between you and Allah. And we're so obsessed nowadays, rectify your intentions, rectify your intentions. We talk more about intentions today than the Prophet ﷺ and the Sahaba talked about back then. Honestly, look back in the Hadith book, read it, find how many times they talked about intention and how many times we talk about it. We're obsessed with the personal piety of Muslims. We've got it the wrong way around. Whereas the public's piety, how you behave in public, is more important. How are you with your community? How are you with others? How are you with those people who follow you? I don't care if you got a long beard, you're Hafiz Quran, and you're the loveliest person in the world, and you fast every day of the week. But if you are a nasty team leader, if you are horrible to work with, if you got a terrible personality, if you're screwing over your people left, right, and center, then you suck. Then you are Timur, and I couldn't care less about you. That's what we need to understand. And I'm saying this right now. We have a public emergency going right now with the coronavirus situation, and I'm dealing with so many people trying to make them work together. And it's so obvious, the ones who were like, you know what, forget my logo, I'm not interested, forget my title, forget who I am, I don't care, I need to work for the betterment of the Muslim world, of the world in general, of the public, of our community. And it's so obvious, those people who are all in it for themselves. Where's my logo? Where's my title? Make sure you call me by this. How dare you? Etc. etc. It's so obvious. And it's the ones, you know, and people say, you know, subhanAllah, you need strong iman to work with Muslims because you lose your faith. I don't care if you're a Muslim leader who builds 100 mosques. If you are oppressive and a tyrant, then you are not the leader that we need. For every single one of us, your public persona is more important than your personal piety. That is between you and Allah, and He will judge you. But your public persona, the rest of us will judge you first. Final lesson, and I know it's Maghrib time, so I will finish very quickly, inshallah. This actually very important side. Timur's man, that guy, there's something different about that guy. So when he was buried, he's buried in this jade, black jade tomb that you see before you. And when he was buried, he said that if anyone opens my tomb, then there will be a curse that befalls them. I don't know why he felt that people would open his tomb, but he put a curse on it anyway, and said if anyone opens it, there will be a curse on those people. A great tragedy will befall them. So no one would bother opening his tomb anyway until the Russians came. And the Russians said, yeah, you know what, we're communists, we don't really believe in this kind of hocus pocus, so we're going to open his tomb and look at his body anyway. And this is a picture of the skeleton of Timur being seen by the Russian communists. The day that they opened his tomb was the day that Hitler launched Operation Barbarossa, which was the invasion of the Soviet Union. 23 million. Let me say that again. 23 million people from Soviet Union died. That Timur looks like he was killing people even after he died. I'll finish here. My last story is the story of the Russian Empire, the Soviet Union. Communism spread all across the Soviet Union, and the communists were in this life and death struggle against the British Empire and against other empires as well. And the British Empire was obsessed with India. You can see on this map over here, India, Afghanistan, Pakistan, it's all here. This is the British Empire, the jewel in the crown. They also controlled China. And they controlled Persia as well and most of the Middle East. And this was the area in between Soviet Union and Russia where they were fighting each other. And they had their Cold War over here. The British called it the Great Game. You know, because when you're an empire and you can play around with the world like a chessboard, it is a game. So the British called it the Great Game, and the Russians called it in a slightly more cool way. They called it the Tournament of Shadows. Anyway, they had spies everywhere in the Muslim Emirates over here, and they were constantly trying to fight each other. There's a really cool story about a British spy who faked his own death, and he left. The Russian spies were like, no. They when they heard about his death, they said, no, he didn't die. He faked his death. And his superiors said, no, I'm certain he's dead. And they asked, how can you be so certain? He said, look, he left his toothbrush, and a British man would never leave his toothbrush, so he definitely must be dead. And he wasn't dead. He wrote down his diary later. He goes, I knew that's what they would think, but I had 2 toothbrushes. That's a kind of a thing. That was not so much James Bond, I guess. But anyway, so they were fighting it out. And eventually the Russians won. And when the Russians won, they didn't just conquer the land. They wanted to conquer the minds. So they launched a propaganda campaign aimed at the poorest and the richest of society about how communism is about justice, how communism is taking it away from all those evil mullahs and all those evil rich people who kept you under their thumb. And the people, they brought it. And you could see it, right? You could see this image is all the mullahs and the people with their beards and hijab. And this woman, she's liberated. She's taken off her hijab. And these people, they've shaved. They're liberated. They've taken communism. And this is exactly what happened. Communism spread like wildfire. As one scholar once said, I would have rather an atomic bomb be dropped on the Muslims than communism. Because an atomic bomb will kill physically, but communism ripped the faith out of our people. And that is true. When I went to Uzbekistan, what I found was a land that had the mosques and the madrasas, but I didn't find Islam. Yes, they were Muslims, but Islam had been removed so far away from them. And admittedly, I went to the big cities, so I know I'm generalizing. In the towns and the villages, in the Fergana Valley and those kind of places, yes, maybe Islam was still there. For a large part of the Central Asian Republic, Islam has been taken away. And I tried to pray in those mosques that I showed you. And a guard would come running and say, no, you're not allowed to pray here. But I said, this is a masjid. And he goes, no, you need to go somewhere else. Go somewhere else, walk 2 miles this way, 2 miles that way. There's a hut, you can go pray there, but you can't pray here. This is what is left of the Muslim world in the Central Asian Republic, of the land of Imam Bukhari, of the land of Imam Muslim, of the land of Al-Biruni. This is what is left. Communism has had a deep impact. And this is a picture of, when communism took over, they didn't need to keep, the Muslims themselves did the work. This is a picture of all the Muslim women gathering together in squares, ripping off their hijab and burning them as a symbol of oppression, of violence against them. Because they've been fed up. They've been fed up of being shunted to the back. They've been fed up of being uneducated. They've been fed up of being treated like second-class citizens. So injustice leads to more injustice. And that's why this is now a museum, not a functioning madrasa or mosque. It is starting to change though, a little bit, but still there's a long way to go. What's the last lesson? The last lesson I think we need to have is true loss is not losing any war. We lost against, the Muslims were defeated by Genghis Khan, but Islam survived. The Muslims were defeated at the time of Timur Lane and the plague, but Islam survived. But when you lost their faith against communism, that was the true defeat. True loss is not losing a war or a battle or land or losing any material object. It is losing your faith. That is the most valuable possession that we have as Muslims. Everything else comes secondary. And only when you see Islam lost, only when you walk amongst the ruins of Andalusia and Uzbekistan and Khorasan on the Silk Road, do you realize exactly how valuable your faith is. It gives life to a lifeless land. The buildings are still there, but the scientists, what made it special is not. The people are still there, but what made it valuable to us isn't. And that, inshallah, will change. I'll finish with this last story because I want to finish on a hopeful note. When, at the time that communism was taking over, just before that, it was the Russian Empire, the Tsar of Russia. And at that time, it was World War I. So Russia was engaged in warfare in World War I. And the Russians, because the Russians had conquered this land, they had taken the Quran of Uthman, one of the 6 copies of Uthman Anhu's Quran, from Bibi Khanum Mosque and taken it back here to the Hermitage in St. Petersburg. This is the home of the Russian, this is like Buckingham Palace for the Russian Empire, in the Hermitage. And it was kept there in their treasure room, along with all the treasures. Now, at the time, the Russian Empire was unstable. It was about to collapse. And everyone knew that it was unstable and it was about to collapse, and there was going to be a revolution, a communist revolution. We don't know what kind of revolution, but there will be a revolution. One of the generals in the Russian army was a Muslim. The Muslims tend to be generals in lots of armies. The generals, you know, the top generals from Mao that conquered Tibet were Muslims. So similarly, some of the top generals in the Russian army were Muslims. And one of the generals who was fighting near Siberia was a Muslim. And he called in his own lieutenant, who was also a Muslim, into his room. And he said, listen, it looks like the Russian Empire might fall any day now. I have a special mission for you. What's the mission? He goes, travel with all due haste to St. Petersburg. Race across the continent, get to St. Petersburg as quickly as you can. And wait. Wait for the exact moment that the Russian Empire collapses. And the exact moment it collapses, in the chaos that takes place for those few minutes, for those few hours when nobody knows who's in charge and who isn't. In that chaos, I want you to rush into the Hermitage. I want you to rush into the treasury room. I want you to go past all the priceless paintings and the gold and the jewels and the Fabergé eggs. And I want you to grab the Quran of Uthman anhu. And I want you to bring it back. And this man set off on a race against time. He reached the Hermitage just in time. As he reached, the Russian Empire collapsed. As the people were on the streets, he rushed in. He went past all the greatest treasures in the world and grabbed the greatest treasure that we have, the Quran, Uthman anhu, and brought it back. And you can go and see it today in the city of Tashkent, even now. My brothers and sisters, even in our darkest moments, no matter how dark the night, the light of faith will always shine, and there will always be people to shine that light for us, to give us a way out of the darkness, to show us that the darkness one day will end, and one day we will witness the dawn, inshallah. Make yourself one of those points of light, because today we are in the dark nights of the Muslim world. Today we are in the dark nights of our history, and you have a choice. Be a light at our time of darkness, shine it brightly, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us all the ability to stay safe and to help others around us. Jazakallah khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Jazakallah khair. Thank you so much, Dr. Wajid. That was amazing, mashallah. Brothers and sisters, for those of you who are watching from the US, from Canada, from Germany, Dr. Wajid, we had a Charity Week World, or the Universal Charity Week, get involved, and they've been watching across the globe, mashallah. Do you want to say a few words to them?
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Jazakallah khairan for attending. Stay safe, please. This is the time to make a lot of istighfar, make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and then work hard, inshallah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us and our families and our communities from whatever is coming.
And brothers and sisters, those of you who are watching, it is Maghrib time. It's slightly gone over in the UK, so forgive us the rest of the world. It's time for us to go in a couple of minutes. Those of you who are watching and have it's your first time or your first opportunity to get involved in Islamic relief, welcome to the family. Welcome to our universe, inshallah. Once you come through the doors, you never go back out. So do get involved in whatever way. There's so many activities. Doesn't matter which part of the world you're from, you probably find a Islamic relief team member or office near you where you can get involved in doing some sort of activities in any way, shape, or form. We do need you guys to like. In fact, there's a love button. Give some love to Dr. Wajid for this amazing reminder. And do like, do share, switch on the notifications, inshallah. Before I go, I wanted to mention tomorrow night, UK, so GMT 8 p.m. or 8:30 p.m., we have our usual history nights. so not history nights. Our usual live from the basement. From the basement is a chat show, just engaging our volunteers, our network, our friends, just sort of a bit of light-hearted discussion for our younger generation. Maybe it's a bit younger than me and you, Dr. Wajid. But hey, it's every Thursdays, 8:30 p.m. GMT, yeah, so UK timing. Do sign up for that one, and it's called Volunteers. So I'm a volunteer. Get me out of here. Um, and those of you who watch a bit of TV, you can imagine the play on the words. But it's about volunteers who are in quarantine, who are we all are having a tough time because we're not used to it. And it's just about making a bit of a sort of a bit of discussion on what we can do and how we can keep ourselves busy. There are some fun and games to get involved. So before we end here, please do stay tuned for the coming one. I know we initially promised that we might not have a history night in Ramadan, and I agree that with Dr. Wajid. However, we are going to have discussions after this, inshallah, to see, because we didn't envisage this situation, and if we can do another one, inshallah, in Ramadan. If that is the case, do again like the page so then you'll be updated with any of the posters. And brothers and sisters, please, even if you watched it late or you're watching it an hour later, because everything's on demand nowadays. Even if you're watching it later on and it's not live, please do share it so other people can benefit from this. Dr. Wajid, you have the last few words, and we'll end the show here.
I have nothing to say. I'll just Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Jazakallah khair for the opportunity.
No, thank you so much, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum, everyone.
The Virtual Mosque is brought to you by Islamic Relief and our kind friends and patrons. Please donate now.